There is a specific kind of discovery that arrives not with drama, but with quietness. The kind that happens when you are doing something routine and you come across a fact that has been sitting in plain sight for years and which, once you see it, reorganizes everything around it. I have had a few of those in my life. The one that this story is about arrived on a Tuesday afternoon in March, when I was sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee and the county's GIS tax parcel map open on my laptop, doing the kind of routine property boundary review that I do every few years to make sure nothing has shifted or been encroached upon. And I followed the line of the county road that ran along my northern boundary and discovered that it did not, in fact, run entirely along my northern boundary. For approximately 900 feet in the middle stretch, the road crossed my property, not my boundary, my property. The centerline of the road was inside my deed description. The road was built on my land. This had been true for 53 years. Nobody had noticed, or nobody who noticed had said anything, and in 53 years of a road being in the wrong place, that road had become the access road for something that had not existed when the road was built, which was Clowata Estates, a 46-home HOA development that sat in a valley to the east of my property, and which had exactly one road in and one road out, both of which used the same route. Which was the route that crossed my land for 900 feet before reaching the county road system. My name is Jack Watfold. I am 63 years old. I am the third generation of Watfolds to own and operate Watfold Ranch in Clowata County, Montana, which as of this writing encompasses 2,518 acres of mixed grazing land, timber, creek bottom, and mountain terrain that my grandfather acquired in several parcels between 1938 and 1951, and which my father expanded slightly in 1972. I grew up on this land. I know every section of it in the way that you know things you have walked and ridden and worked since childhood, not academically, not from maps, but from the specific physical memory of the terrain that accumulates over decades of moving through it on horseback and on foot and in trucks and on equipment. I know where the creek floods in spring and where it runs low in August. I know which ridges catch the east wind and which hollows hold fog until noon. I know my property's boundaries because I have ridden them, because my father rode them before me, and because my grandfather staked them originally and talked about them until the day he died. What I did not know until that Tuesday in March was that the road had been built in the wrong place. The history, as I reconstructed it from county records over the following 2 weeks, was straightforward. In 1971, the County Road Department had extended a secondary road from the county system into the valley east of my property to serve timber access. The road engineer who did the survey had made an error, not a large error in absolute terms, but large enough to matter. He had placed the road's easement corridor approximately 40 feet too far south in the middle section, which put 900 feet of the road's actual paved surface inside the boundary of Watfold Ranch. The error had been in the county's records since 1971. Nobody had caught it. My grandfather had died in 1978 and may or may not have been aware of it. My father had never mentioned it. The county had maintained the road as a county road for 53 years without realizing the paved portion crossed private land. Clowata Estates had been developed in 1994 using this road as its access, platted and sold with the understanding that the access road was a county road on county right-of-way, because that is what every document said and what every party believed. What every party believed was wrong. I want to describe the specific quality of the feeling that arrived when I had confirmed this through 3 separate methods of verification: the GIS parcel map, the recorded plat for Watfold Ranch, and the original 1938 deed description, because the feeling matters to understanding how I handled the situation. It was not triumph. It was not anger. It was something more like the feeling of a large, slow gear turning somewhere in the machinery of a situation, the sense of a fact becoming real that had been potential for a long time and that would now require actual decisions from actual people. I understood immediately that what I had found was legally significant in a way that went considerably beyond a property line dispute. 46 households used this road. School buses used this road. Emergency vehicles used this road. Mail carriers used this road. What I held, if the error was confirmed by a licensed survey, was potentially the ability to close the only access to an entire residential community. I did not want to close the access. I want to be clear about that. Not because I was not entitled to, a landowner's rights over their own property are real and I was aware of them, but because 46 families living their daily lives in a neighborhood they had purchased in good faith deserved to be treated as what they were, which was innocent parties to an error they had not made. Whatever the HOA board had done or not done, the residents of Clowater Estates had bought homes with the reasonable expectation that they could get in and out of them, and that expectation deserved respect regardless of the underlying property question. What I wanted was resolution, a proper recorded easement that put the situation on legal footing that matched reality, with terms that reflected the value of what I was providing and that addressed the 53 years of uncompensated use. Those two things were not unreasonable. They were, in fact, exactly what the situation called for. I called a licensed land surveyor named Gary Hullers, who had done survey work for me twice before and who I trusted to give me an accurate answer before I did anything else. I said I had a potential boundary issue on the north section and I wanted a full survey of the road corridor. Gary came out within the week. His survey took 2 days. His report confirmed what I had found on the GIS map. The county road crossed Watfold Ranch property for a distance of 911 feet in the middle section, with the road's pavement surface entirely within my deed description for that stretch. The survey was stamped and sealed and recorded with the county. I engaged an attorney, not someone from Clowater County. I wanted someone who did not have existing relationships with the parties that might complicate their advice. I found a woman named Patricia Morrow at a firm in Great Falls who specialized in rural property rights and water law and who had the specific background to advise me on this situation without bias. I sent her Gary's survey, the Whitfield Ranch deed, the county road records, and the Clearwater Estates plat. She reviewed everything and called me 10 days later. Patricia said, "Jack, the survey is conclusive. The road crosses your property. The county has no recorded easement on your land for this stretch. Clearwater Estates has no recorded easement. Neither the county nor the developer obtained one because they believed the road was on county right-of-way, which the survey establishes it was not." She said, "You have the right to close the road to non-authorized traffic. You also have the right to negotiate an easement and to seek retroactive compensation for the prior unauthorized use." She said, "The practical question is what you actually want to accomplish, because how you approach this will determine what you get." I said I wanted a properly recorded easement for the road at fair market value. I wanted some acknowledgement of the prior unauthorized use in the form of a reasonable one-time payment, and I wanted specific terms in the easement about road maintenance and any future development in the corridor. I did not want to close the road permanently or harm the community. Patricia said those were reasonable goals and asked whether I had spoken to anyone at the county or the HOA yet. I said no. She said good. She wanted to control the information carefully, because how the other parties learned about the situation would shape the negotiation dynamic significantly. Patricia sent a letter to 2 parties simultaneously on a Monday morning in late April: the Clearwater County Road Department and the Clearwater Estates HOA, care of their management company. Both letters were identical in their core finding, that a licensed survey had established that the county road serving Clearwater Estates crossed Whitfield Ranch private property for 911 feet without a recorded easement, and both letters stated that Mr. Whitfield was prepared to negotiate a resolution, but that any negotiation must begin with a formal acknowledgement of the survey's findings and a mutual commitment to good faith discussion. The letters gave 30 days for initial response. I received the first call that same afternoon. It was not from the county, and it was not from the HOA management company. It was from the Clearwater County Sheriff, a man named Carl Bridger, who I had known for 20 years and who called me on my personal cell phone and said, "Jack, I just heard something that I need to understand before it becomes a problem." I said, "Go ahead." Carl said, "Patricia Morrow's office sent a letter to the county road department that says your land is under their road." I said that was correct. Carl said, how long have you known? I said, since March. He said, and you're just now telling them? I said I had spent 2 months doing due diligence before taking any action because I wanted to be certain before I said anything. He said, Jack, the Clearwater Estates people are going to panic. I said I knew that, which was why my letter had specifically asked for good faith negotiation rather than leading with any threat or ultimatum. Carl said, is that what you want? Negotiation? I said yes. He said, Jack, I want to ask you something off the record. I said, go ahead. He said, have you thought about what happens if this doesn't resolve? I said I had thought about it. He said, what happens? I said, Carl, if it doesn't resolve, I have a licensed survey, a stamped deed, a recorded plat, and a Great Falls attorney with 30 years of rural property rights experience. What happens depends on what the county and the HOA decide to do. He was quiet for a moment. He said, I hear you. He said, I'm going to make some calls. I said that was his prerogative. The HOA management company called Patricia's office the following day. The county road department called the day after that. Patricia reported both calls to me the same evening. She said the HOA management company was panicked, which she had expected, and that the county road department was also panicked, which she had also expected, and that both were asking what it would take to resolve the situation immediately. Patricia said, Jack, they both want this done yesterday. That's the right negotiating environment. I said, what did she recommend? She said, we take the next 10 days to prepare a complete proposal, easement terms, compensation calculation, maintenance provisions, and then we present it as a complete package that they can accept or modify. Don't let them set the terms by asking you to name a price first. I said that made sense. I said let's build the package. The compensation calculation was the part I spent the most time on. Patricia and I worked through it together over several evenings. The components were the fair market value of a perpetual road easement for the 911-foot corridor, calculated based on comparable easement sales in Clearwater County and adjacent counties over the prior 10 years, which Patricia's research put at between $12 and $18 per lineal foot for a paved road easement. The retroactive consideration for 53 years of unauthorized use, which Patricia calculated at a nominal annual easement value for the period before Clearwater Estates existed and at a higher annual value for the 30 years since the development had been using the road. And a maintenance contribution fund that would ensure the road surface and drainage were maintained to a standard consistent with its use as a primary residential access road for 46 households, including emergency vehicle access. The perpetual easement valuation at $15 per lineal foot on 911 feet was $13,665. The retroactive consideration, calculated conservatively, was 22 years at $500 per year before the development and 30 years at $2,000 per year after it, producing a total of $31,000. The maintenance fund contribution was a capital amount of $15,000 deposited into a dedicated maintenance account, plus an annual contribution to the fund indexed to the road's maintenance costs. The total one-time payment for the easement, retroactive consideration, and maintenance fund deposit was $59,665, which Patricia and I rounded to $60,000 as the opening position. The total package also included the following easement terms. The easement was perpetual and appurtenant to Clearwater Estates. The county maintained the paved surface consistent with county road standards. The easement corridor was limited to the existing road footprint plus 5 feet on each side for drainage and maintenance. No additional development within the easement corridor without Whitfield Ranch's written consent, and an annual easement fee of $2,000 payable to Whitfield Ranch, adjustable every 5 years to fair market value. Patricia presented the package to both parties on a Thursday morning, 10 days after the initial letters had been sent. The County Road Department's attorney called that afternoon. He said, Ms. Mora, I've reviewed the package. She said, and, he said, the survey is airtight. She said she knew. He said, we need to discuss this internally, but I want to tell you now, the county is going to want to resolve this. 53 years of an unrecorded encroachment on a county road is not something we want going to litigation. She said she was glad to hear it. The HOA attorney, they had retained one from Billings by the following week, called the day after. He said, "I've shown this to the board. They're upset about the numbers." Patricia said she understood the numbers were significant. He said, "They're arguing it's not their fault the road was built wrong." She said, "Mr. Whitfield is not asserting it's their fault. He's asserting that the road is on his property and that a proper recorded easement needs to exist." He said, "What's negotiable?" She said, "The retroactive figure has some flexibility. The perpetual easement terms and the maintenance provisions are not." He said he would go back to his clients. I want to be honest about what happened next and how long it took, because in stories like this, the temptation is to present the resolution as arriving quickly and cleanly, and this one did not. It took 4 months. 4 months of calls between attorneys, of revised proposals, of the county and the HOA arguing about who bore the cost and in what proportions, of the HOA's board having internal disagreements that slowed things down, of one board member retaining their own personal attorney, which added a third voice to an already complicated conversation. 4 months of Patricia keeping me informed every week and of my knowing, as I had known since the first Tuesday in March, that time and the survey were on my side, and that patience was the correct strategy. In those 4 months, I did not close the road. I had the legal right to do so. A landowner can exclude unauthorized parties from their property, but I did not exercise it because 46 families needed to get to work and their children needed to get to school and their mail needed to arrive. And those needs were real and immediate and independent of the legal question, and I was not going to weaponize those needs. Patricia had advised me that restraint in this period was both ethically appropriate and strategically correct. It demonstrated good faith and maintained the moral position that had been mine from the beginning, which was that I wanted resolution, not disruption. But in August, when the 4th month of negotiation produced a board meeting at which 2 members voted to challenge the survey rather than settle, I called Patricia and said I needed her to send a letter. I discovered the HOA's only access road crossed my 2,500 acres, so I shut it down overnight. The letter Patricia sent in August was 3 paragraphs. The first paragraph referenced the prior 4 months of negotiation and documented the specific progress, 2 revised proposals, 3 counter-proposals, and the current impasse created by 2 board members' vote to challenge the survey. The second paragraph stated that Mr. Whitfield had exercised patience in the interest of good faith negotiation and community stability, and that this patience had been extended for as long as the circumstances permitted. The third paragraph said the following, and I want to reproduce it in substance because the language mattered. Mr. Whitfield hereby provides formal notice that as of 14 days from the date of this letter, access to his property by unauthorized parties will be restricted pursuant to his rights as the fee simple owner of the land in question. He remains available for good faith negotiation during this period and sincerely hopes a resolution can be reached that serves all parties. However, he can no longer hold open the option of continued unauthorized access indefinitely while one party delays resolution through procedural challenges to established survey evidence. 14 days. Patricia told me afterward that she had received 3 phone calls within 4 hours of the letter being delivered. The HOA's attorney, the County Road Department's attorney, and this one surprised her, a personal attorney retained by a Clearwater Estates resident named Douglas Hatch, who had apparently decided to get ahead of the situation individually. She had told Douglas Hatch's attorney that his client's best path was to advocate within the HOA for settlement rather than pursuing individual action, and that individual action would not change the underlying property facts. Douglas Hatch's attorney had called back the next day and said Douglas Hatch had indeed been to the HOA board and had told them in terms apparently more direct than any attorney's letter that the time for procedural challenges was over. The 2 board members who had voted to challenge the survey reversed their positions at a special meeting called 3 days after the letter. The vote to authorize settlement was unanimous. The HOA's attorney called Patricia the same day and said his clients wanted to schedule a mediated settlement conference within the week. The settlement conference was held on a Thursday. Patricia attended on my behalf. The County Road Department was represented by their attorney and the County Commissioner's office. The HOA was represented by their attorney and the board president, a man named Robert Sims, who Patricia described as genuinely trying to do right by his community under difficult circumstances. The mediation was conducted by a retired district court judge named Margaret Fontaine, who had 30 years of experience in Montana property disputes, and who, Patricia told me, had seen variations of this situation before and ran the session with the brisk efficiency of someone who understood all the moving pieces and was not going to allow the session to expand into areas it did not need to cover. The session lasted 6 hours. I was available by phone throughout, but was not present, which was Patricia's recommendation. My presence might have made the HOA feel outnumbered or cornered, and the goal was agreement, not victory theater. I sat at my kitchen table for 6 hours, reviewing grazing records from the summer season and taking Patricia's calls when she stepped out of the room. The settlement reached was as follows. The County Road Department would record a formal road easement on the 911-foot corridor, running from the existing county right-of-way on the west end to the existing county right-of-way on the east end, properly surveyed and monumented. The easement would be perpetual and would include a 30-foot corridor centered on the existing road surface, with a 5-foot maintenance strip on each side. The county would pay Whitfield Ranch $42,000 as a combined easement purchase price and retroactive consideration, which reflected a reduction from our $60,000 opening position that Patricia had anticipated and which she judged as reasonable given the split between county and HOA responsibility. The HOA would pay Whitfield Ranch $18,000 from a special assessment on its 46-member households, approximately $391 per household. The maintenance fund was restructured. Rather than a capital deposit, the county agreed to maintain the road to county road standards, which was in effect what they had been doing anyway, but now with a recorded obligation and accountability. The annual easement fee was set at $1,500, splitting the difference between my proposed $2,000 and the HOA's counter of $1,000, payable to Whitfield Ranch annually by the county as part of the road easement agreement, with the county recovering a proportional share from the HOA under a separate maintenance sharing agreement. Total one-time payment to Whitfield Ranch, $60,000. Annual recurring payment, $1,500 in perpetuity, adjustable every 10 years. The easement was drafted, reviewed by Patricia and the county's attorney, signed by the county commissioner, and recorded with the Clearwater County Clerk and Recorder's Office in September. The survey monuments were placed by Gary Hollies and referenced in the recorded document. The payment arrived in Patricia's trust account within 30 days of recording and was disbursed to me after her fees. I want to say something about Robert Sims, the HOA board president, because he did something at the settlement conference that Patricia told me about afterward and that I thought was worth noting. When the session concluded and the agreement was signed, Robert had asked Margaret Fontaine if he could say something off the record before everyone left. Margaret had allowed it. Robert had said, directly and without any evident intention of performing for anyone, "I want to acknowledge that Jack Whitfield spent 4 months not closing a road he had the legal right to close, so that 46 families could continue their normal lives while we figured this out. The least we could have done was figure it out faster." Patricia told me this and I said, "How did the room respond?" She said, quietly, "The way rooms respond when someone has said something true." I drove the north section of the ranch on a Saturday in October, which is something I try to do every fall when the leaves are changing and the light is at its October angle. The county road runs through the 911-foot corridor the same as it always has. It did not change because the legal situation changed, because roads do not reorganize themselves when titles do. The pavement is the same. The drainage is the same. Cattle guard at the east end, where the road enters my property, is the same cattle guard my father put in 40 years ago to keep the herd from the access corridor. The only thing different is that there is now a survey monument on each end of the corridor, grey metal posts set in concrete by Gary Hollies, each stamped with the easement reference number and the date, which any surveyor in any future generation will be able to find and reference and use to understand exactly what is there and why. I stopped my truck at the West Monument and got out and looked at it. The monument was not a dramatic thing. It was a 4-inch aluminum pipe, about 18 inches tall, set flush with the grade, with a stamped cap on top. But it was real in the specific way that recorded instruments are real. It had a legal life that would outlast me and everyone currently involved in the story. And it said clearly and permanently what the situation was and what had been agreed to and what the terms were. And no future owner of Whitfield Ranch and no future resident of Clearwater Estates would have to reconstruct this situation from a GIS error and a Tuesday afternoon with a cup of coffee. Because the monument and the recorded easement would tell them exactly what was there. My grandfather staked this land in 1938. He rode the boundaries every year until he could not ride anymore, and then my father rode them, and then I did. We rode them because the boundaries were the beginning of everything. They were what distinguished this land from the land adjacent to it, what made it ours to steward, and not anyone else's responsibility. The surveyor who built the road in 1971 had made an error that my grandfather and my father and I had missed for 52 years. And when I found it, I did the things you do with a significant discovery, which were to verify it, document it, get proper professional advice, and pursue a resolution that respected both my rights and the practical realities of the people affected. The road is still there, the access is intact, the easement is recorded, the monument stands at the west end of the corridor, grey aluminum in the October grass, saying nothing out loud and everything in writing. That is how it should have been for 53 years. Now it is how it will be going forward. I got back in the truck and drove the rest of the section. The creek was running well for October. The timber on the east ridge was turning. The cattle were where they were supposed to be. The fence lines were where they were supposed to be. The ranch was what it had always been, my grandfather's, then my father's, then mine, and all 2,518 acres of it were documented in instruments that said so clearly and permanently in the Clearwater County Clerk and Recorder's Office, available to anyone who wanted to read them.